So, Spider-Man: Far From Home. It's the second Spider-Man film, and I kind of love how, with like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, at least for the past few years, it's always seemed like we get like the heavier themes of like the other Marvel films, and then when we get to summer, we kind of have like a little bit of a kickback, a little bit more of like a simpler superhero blockbuster. I mean, we kind of had a little bit of that last year with Ant-Man and the Wasp, and then the year prior we had it with Spider-Man: Homecoming. And we kind of had it maybe a little bit with Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. But here we've got Spider-Man: Far From Home. And this is going to be the film that's going to close out Phase 3 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And it might seem like with that structure, it might seem like it's a little bit like kind of like Ant-Man. It's just kind of like, oh, just a little bit of a light closer, a little bit of a light note here. But I love the fact that Far From Home is not trying to be just like kind of like to end on a lighter note. It's actually trying to embrace the next wave of Marvel films. So if you got to the end of Avengers Endgame and you looked at that and you said like, oh damn, that's a great end to this saga. So where are we gonna go next from here? What's gonna happen next? And it can be a little scary to think like, well, what's going to continue on after the events of Endgame. And I love the fact how Far From Home basically assures us, look, we're going to keep trying here. We're not just going to like settle for like the simple superhero stuff. We are going to change stuff up. We are going to make stuff more interesting. And this by far is definitely, I think, one of the Marvel Cinematic Universe films that does the most cage rattling. Like it shakes up so much of what we've come to know from like a lot of these Marvel films, and even Spider-Man films, that we get to there's something so refreshing about it. It makes me so excited for the next round of Marvel films. So the way that this film starts off, it tries to establish itself as kind of getting back to normal. So they address what happened with Endgame after Thanos did the big snap, and like half of everyone in existence just faded out. And then when they just kind of like came back. Now it's interesting because they bring up, how do you adjust to that? Because like in the events of Endgame, it takes place 5 years after those events. So when everyone comes back, they haven't aged 5 years. So it creates this weird little dilemma about, okay, if they haven't aged 5 years, then like, where does it place them in society? Now for Peter Parker, once again played by Tom Holland, and his high school peers, what it basically means for them is they haven't graduated yet, while the rest of their friends who didn't get snapped have gone on to like college or something. So they think it's unfair, 5-year gap, and then all the friends I can't be in school with. But whatever, they try to get back to normal, and things get back to more or less what would happen in the Spider-Man type story. He's back in science class again, and once again they're going on a trip. This time they're going to Europe, and on this trip, Peter Parker's more concerned about just getting in the good graces of MJ, once again played by Zendaya. He's still kind of lusting after MJ in hopes that maybe this trip their relationship will be more solid. And then of course you have great, I forgot his name. Jacob Batalon, who's playing Peter Parker's geeky best friend here, who's also kind of like in this mindset of like he has different ambitions for this trip. Now for the first like fourth of the film, we it's kind of the same way. It's kind of directed the same way as Homecoming, where we get into the groove of Spider-Man. We get to feel like we're back in high school. We're with them on this European vacation, and it feels like like teenagers on a vacation. They set the mood just right, so it doesn't feel like it's just like typical padding before we get to the superhero stuff. And it kind of feels like we've come to expect. But then once we actually do get into the superhero stuff, we have Nick Fury stop by, and he's basically saying like, hey, look, I got more superhero gigs for you, Spider-Man. We got more stuff to do. Once more played by Samuel L. Jackson, and he has this great sternness to him because he knows that, since Tony Stark is gone, I gotta rely a little bit more on Peter Parker, since he's in the good graces of Stark Industries. And he's not too happy about this. He's kind of like, this is just a kid, and I don't know if I can really rely on him. And I love the fact that even Peter doesn't think that he can rely on himself either, because he has to now realize that there's a work-life balance to balancing the superhero stuff with his high school stuff. And he kind of comes to the realization that, we have so many superheroes, like why does it all have to be on me? Can't you find like other superheroes to do this type of stuff? They kind of bring that stuff up. And it's mostly because like it seems like, you know, just like kind of like typical stuff. Like the initial plot is that there's a character like we've seen in the trailer, Mysterio, played by Jake Gyllenhaal, who's apparently come from another dimension, and he's got to come over to our dimension to fight these giant elemental monsters that ravaged his own planet. Now they're ravaging ours. Sounds like fairly typical superhero stuff. And I love the fact that the film plays on this because it plays off the fact that, you know, in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they have all these heroes, they have all these villains, and there's such terror with everything. I mean, they've had like evil wizards, murderous robots, alien invasions. They've had corrupt governments that have come after them. They have secret governments that have come out of nowhere. They have, you know, even more aliens coming from the stars. So it's terrifying, and a good villain can find a way to take advantage of that and shape the world around that, especially taking advantage of all the paranoia that comes after the events of Endgame. And I love how once they reveal who the villain is, it kind of plays into that. And I love the fact that that's the interesting thing I love so much about this. It's because it assumes that we've settled into like so much of the expected superhero theatrics that by the second half of the film, it shakes all those expectations off. Like everything you thought you knew about the film, like halfway through, will just be shattered by the next half. Like, cause like going through like the first half's kind of like, oh, this is pretty good. I mean, it seems pretty typical. And then you get to the second half and you're just like, oh, this is what the film's about. And then I really started getting interested. I started getting more into the story, more into the action, and love how there's still a bit of that balance with kind of like the teenage comedy aspect, the teenage romance aspect, while still presenting a pretty damn good superhero story. Now, let me read the chat really quick. How many villains are in this? I don't want to reveal too much. Like I said, there's a lot of huge surprises in here that I can't really reveal without talking about the entire story here. So more or less what I'm trying to do is not spoil it by just talking about the themes here, which are some great themes. Like I said, the work-life balance stuff is great. I love that Peter still has a bit of like this kind of like PTSD of not being able to accept that Tony's gone and not feeling confident in himself. When in fact we can see like a lot of aspects of Tony coming through here. And a lot of other characters can too, like especially Jon Favreau, once again playing Happy, who used to work with Tony Stark, and now he's kind of working alongside Peter and kind of more or less being his mentor here. Once again, you have Marissa Tomei. She gets in a few fun lines here and there. And there's a few other interesting actors who show up here who I'm not gonna mention because it's fun there. It's really fun how they introduce them in the film. But yeah, I gotta mention the casting here. The casting is amazing. They do a great job using these characters well. Tom Holland has the perfect amount of pluck to be this sort of like awkward teenager who's not sure of himself, whether it comes to being involved with like superhero stuff or coming to terms with his feelings for MJ. He has this great awkwardness to him that hasn't quite left from Homecoming. That's the one great aspect I love that they carried over. I love how Zendaya seems like she seems both scathing and sure of herself, but also a little bit frazzled by the whole superhero stuff, just a little bit to reveal a little bit more of her personality to her. I love how they use Jake Gyllenhaal here, especially because like if you've seen Jake Gyllenhaal's other performances, you know that he has this great like explosive energy to him, and it comes out here beautifully. I absolutely love how they use it. They also do they also like play, like I said, they've played greatly off of everything that's come before this film, not just within like you know what happened in the events of Infinity War and Endgame, but they bring in like I said, similar to Endgame, they also bring in like, you know, aspects from like past films that you pretty much forgot about, or things you didn't even know about in previous other films involving like Iron Man and Captain America, a whole bunch of different crazy stuff. Like I said, I can't say too much, which really stinks. This more than, like, I'm used to doing reviews that are spoiler free, but this one is really hard to do because there's some juicy surprises in this film. Especially, I'll say this though, the end credit Easter eggs. There are two of them. Yes, there's a mid credit Easter egg and a post credit. These are probably the most satisfying and the most rewarding Easter eggs that I've seen in a long time with these Marvel films. Usually, usually Easter eggs tend to be the same thing. It's like, oh, let's allude to like this character who might be in a future film, and I'm just like, oh, okay, whatever. Okay, yeah, maybe this character will come in, maybe they won't. Maybe they'll just build up something through there. But what's interesting I like about this is that the Easter eggs are actually like genuine surprises, not for like future films, but for the actual films. I mean, not the actual, the within Far From Home. There's like a few more surprises. Like if you thought you were surprised with like the whole second half of the film, just wait till you get to the 2 post-credit Easter eggs. Those will shake you pretty hard and get you really excited. It's interesting. I found myself like exceptionally excited about this more than any other solo superhero film that I've seen in quite some time. And it just makes me so excited for the future. It's not because they leave anything lingering here. They have a pretty complete story for Spider-Man, but it sets up this great new aspect going into the future that I'm so hopeful for like the next round of Marvel films. So, for Spider-Man Far From Home, 4.5 out of 5 stars.